Hey guys, it's Stephanie and I'm here to do a recommendations video, and today I'm going to be recommending some great horror books that are available on Kindle Unlimited. This is in no way sponsored by Amazon or Kindle Unlimited. I personally have a subscription because I think with the amount of books I read and the amount of indie horror that I am into, I think it's a good investment, but that's just me. And this is more if you already have one and are looking for some recommendations, or if you're considering getting it, and you just want to know what's available out there and if it's worth it, here's some good recommendations for you. So I'm going to break this up into three categories. I'm going to do short story collections, novels, and novellas. So starting off with short story collections, there is Greetings from Moon Hill by Anthony J. Rapino. So in this collection of short stories, they all take place in this fictional town of Moon Hill, Pennsylvania. It's got a very Halloween town feel to it. There's a really good variety in these stories. Some of them really lean on this autumnal theme. Some of them play with darker elements of horror, some of them are funny, and I thought it had a really interesting framing device. So if you want a collection where all the stories are loosely connected and have a strong sense of place, this is one I would recommend. I would also recommend Darkest Hours by Mike Thorn. These short stories are not interconnected, but I did find a few favorites in here, and I think I mention this every time I recommend this short story collection. But the first story in this collection is called Hair, and it has been a story I still think about to this day. Next up is Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked by Christa Carmen, another really great short story collection with a very strong opening story that actually gave me the creep. Just really great stories, great writing, playing on feminism and horror and gore. Some of these stories were on the meta side, some of these were more traditional, and one of the stories that I loved on here was basically A Christmas Carol, but on Halloween and with ex-boyfriends. Now for novels, there is a book that we really loved on the Books in the Freezer podcast, and that was The Nightmare Room by Chris Sorensen. The sequel, The Hungry Ones, is currently available. I haven't read it yet, so hopefully when I do a follow-up video to this, I can recommend that one as well. But the first in the series, The Nightmare Room, is available on Kindle Unlimited, and this is kind of a haunted house story, but I would say with a bit of a twist. The main character is an audiobook narrator, and the author, Christopher Sorensen, is also an audiobook narrator, and really brought in, well, first of all, it brought in an authenticity, but it also brought in like a creepiness to having to like lock yourself in a sound booth for hours a day and in a house that might be haunted or have something going on. It was very interesting and new. Next up is Twin Lakes, The Autumn Fires, and that is by Melissa Lazon and Michelle Garza. They are sisters. I think they go by like the Sisters of Slaughter, and they write a lot of books together. But I really enjoyed this one because it took a lot of tropes that I like and kind of went a new direction with them. So it starts off with this girl who is brutally attacked but somehow survives this attack and kind of wakes up in the middle of nowhere and wanders into a town to find help. And this is a small town with some secrets, which is something that I love. Yeah, I really liked the turn that this one took. So that was Twin Lakes, The Autumn Fires. Next up is a book that I am sure is going to be on my favorites list this year, and that is Odd Adventures with Your Other Father, and this is by Prentiss. This has an interesting setup. The main character is telling his daughter stories about his late husband and the adventures that they got into the summer after they graduated college, and they went on this cross-country road trip in the 80s, and all of the supernatural evils that they face, but also the very real evils of homophobia that they face, and how there may have even been some things that were passed on to his daughter. This book was the right amount of like supernatural and poignant and had these characters and actually like made me cry. And now for some novellas, these are all in case you don't know, a novella is longer than a short story, but shorter than a novel. So my cutoff for this is under 200 pages. So these are all stories that are like, I think over 60 pages, under 200. So the first one I want to recommend is Come Closer by Sara Gran. This is a psychological horror possession novel, and it follows a woman who is going through some dark changes in her life, and she feels like she is being taken over by an evil, and you are reading it from her perspective. But throughout the novel, There is a debate of whether this is coming from within, whether this is some kind of a mental illness, or whether she is being possessed. And I think you, as the reader, are also being taken along on this ride and trying to figure out what's true. This story, one, it did a good job of playing with what your sense of reality is, and I think gives you enough that you as the reader aren't sure what to believe, and I think also wasn't afraid to get dark. Next up is a recent read for me, and that is Rites of Extinction by Matt Serafini. And this follows a woman who goes to a small town to track down her daughter's killer, who is also her ex-boyfriend, and finds that he may have been involved in some ritualistic killings and that there may be something off about this small town. So this one I would classify as folk horror. If you want another story that doesn't hold back in the end and isn't afraid to just go there and take turns that you weren't expecting, this is a good one. Next up is Halloween Fiend by C.V. Hunt. This is about a town that is tormented by a creature slash entity called Halloween. The neighbors have rules that they basically have to live by. They have to leave out treats and offerings for this creature if they want to be left alone. And it's about this man who interacts with some outsiders and decides that maybe he wants to fight against these traditions. So this is definitely another one that I would recommend reading around Halloween time. It's got all of the atmosphere. It's got my favorite trope of small towns with, you know, dark secrets. Now for like probably the different or like outlier in these things is a poetry collection, and that is I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. These are poems from the perspectives of female characters in horror movies. Some of these are final girls. First of all, this cover, I absolutely love it. It's got all like the old video cassette thing, says like be kind, rewind. So this is a very short read, but this is a book that I revisit after I watch some of these movies. I mean, this also serves as a watch list for movies to check out, and I love going in and reading that character's poem and seeing what I think of it, you know, with a new perspective each time. These are just really great feminist horror poems. So yes, that is I Am Not Your Final Girl by Claire C. Holland. So anyway, guys, those are my recommendations. I am hoping to make this a regular thing. As I read more books, I will be able to give you more recommendations for books to read on Kindle Unlimited. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!